In the square block area around the Russian parliament, the dwindling band of die-hard Yeltsin opponents continues to build barricades. They get the headlines. But in another part of Moscow, workers are building a new subway station. Their work continued today as if nothing unusual was happening. And the turmoil at the top did not stop Western experts who are advising the Russians on how to privatize their economy.
It's a new power play. You see a new power play every couple of months. But for us, it's business as usual.
If you hadn't read a newspaper or looked at the television this week, you'd never know there was a political crisis here. Every hotel in Moscow is full, not with newsmen covering the news, but with businessmen doing business. They are here because the economic potential of Russia is great. Some are doing mega deals in the oil and gas fields where decisions on a few projects may be delayed. But a Russian-American commodities trader says it hasn't affected his business.
Especially when the powers at the top are fighting each other, so they kind of don't have time to deal with us at the lower level.
At the consumer level, a Western-run supermarket is doing a booming business today, satisfying the new Russian elite's appetite for a taste of the West.
We still shop, we still work every day, we do normal business, and we hope nothing will happen.
But most Russians this week are still struggling to make ends meet in the street markets that symbolize the primitive state of the economy. For them, the barricades at the parliament aren't the answer to their problems. What this country really needs, say Western experts, is to stop building barricades and start building a future. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Moscow.
Russian President Boris Yeltsin today tightened the thumbscrews on his parliamentary enemies. A blockade of the White House, as the Parliament building is known, began just after dawn. Government security forces isolated it in a precise military-style maneuver. In building a security zone in downtown Moscow, the authorities announced they would let members of Parliament out, but not back in. Barriers and police lines kept deputies from rejoining the dwindling numbers still holed up in the parliament. It's not only the physical isolation that's undercutting Yeltsin's enemies, it's the president's effective tactics. He's set up an employment center to offer deputies and parliamentary staffers new jobs. Yevgeny says he's among 100 deputies who came to the center today. He worries about his colleagues still inside the parliament. They are being protected by a ragtag militia, and a small handful of supporters remain just outside the parliament. Inside the building, some are said to be well armed. The government broadcast warnings from an armored vehicle for them to surrender their weapons or else, but no one in Moscow is yet saying what or else means. Jonathan Sanders, CBS News, Moscow. Overnight, supporters of the outlawed Russian parliament challenged the security perimeter established yesterday to isolate opposition politicians. The authorities were fairly restrained until demonstrators got aggressive and tried to break through police lines. Once the riot police called up reinforcements, they beat back the protesters. But having accomplished that, the security forces allowed those angered by the siege of the parliament building to vent their rage. Demonstrators seized control of a few streets in central Moscow. They built barricades not so much to stop troop movements, but as a symbol of earlier Bolshevik victories on the very same streets during the Russian Revolution. As quickly as the barricades went up, the police took them away. Inside the isolated parliament, rebel legislators have been without electricity, water, or heat for days. Remember, said the parliament's chairman, we are the ones upholding the Constitution and the law. So far, they're also holding up under the psychological pressures being applied by President Yeltsin. They were given a vague deadline to clear out of their headquarters this morning. That time has now passed. There are no unusual troop movements evident, and a Yeltsin aide has denied that any full-scale assault is coming. Jonathan Sanders, CBS News, Moscow.
This is what Russia's political crisis has come to. Hardliners trying to force their way to the barricaded parliament building, clashing again tonight with police on the same street where last night an officer died. Three people have now been killed since the standoff began, and today Boris Yeltsin apparently decided enough was enough. His ultimatum to his opponents: disarm and vacate the parliament building by Monday or face unnamed serious consequences. But not all Yeltsin's actions have been democratic. Russian television is still run by the government, and many images seen this past week in the West were never shown here. Even journalists at Russian TV admit Yeltsin's rivals aren't getting equal time.
They don't have the same access because Yeltsin obviously is in control, and he's the one who runs the house at this particular time.
And his tactics aren't subtle. Outside the parliament, a loudspeaker mounted on an armored personnel carrier now blares music and warnings to the deputies inside. Yeltsin has promised not to arrest those who give up their guns and leave. For those who don't, the countdown to Monday has begun. Cindy Kennard, CBS News, Moscow. What's left of the Russian parliament is now virtually sealed off from the world. This morning, police sent in a few more armored personnel carriers to reinforce their barricades. After a second policeman died from injuries suffered in a clash with hardline demonstrators, Boris Yeltsin issued what appeared to be a final ultimatum: disarm and vacate the building by Monday night, he said, or face unnamed serious consequences. But inside the parliament, with a machine gun slung over his shoulder, the other man claiming to be Russia's president remained defiant. If they attack, said Alexander Rutskoy, I can't say who will survive. For the first time in this 9-day-old standoff, there is talk of bringing in a mediator, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Rutskoy says he's open to the idea, and Yeltsin is expected to meet with the church leader later today. Until then, Yeltsin's government is bearing down on his opponents. He has control of Russian television, and even journalists admit the people here are not getting the whole story. Yeltsin's rivals aren't getting equal time.
They don't have the same access because Yeltsin obviously is in control, and he's the one who runs the house at this particular time.
Yeltsin has promised immunity for those who give up their guns and end this standoff peacefully. There's no sign of that yet, as both sides move toward a deadline of Monday. Cindy Kennard, CBS News, Moscow.
The leader of the Russian Orthodox Church today opened the door for a negotiated end to the standoff between the president and the parliament. After meeting with Patriarch Alexei II, Yeltsin agreed to send his chief of staff to talk with parliamentary leaders. They are still holed up in their headquarters, known as the White House. Without heat or electricity, some deputies continued meeting through the night, defying Yeltsin's ban on their existence. Just as the president was sending armored personnel carriers to reinforce the siege of the parliament, its leaders were meeting with the patriarch's emissary. At dawn, a deputy emerged from the White House, telling the only people close enough to listen, the troops on duty, that the parliament had agreed to church mediation. In recent days, angry confrontations between Yeltsin's military and supporters of the parliament have killed 3 people. And today, a group of leaders from outlying provinces threaten to split the country. They say they'll impose their own solution if Yeltsin and the parliament cannot come to terms. The Yeltsin side is now saying an opening must be created for the parliament to back away from its confrontation in an honorable way. Perhaps the Russian Orthodox Church has created that opening, but so far, it's only a hope of possible compromise. Jonathan Sanders, CBS News, Moscow.